So I wanted to share this report that was written by Dr. Alvin Young and AL Young Consulting. Agent Orange, a controversy without end. It's from the Environmental Pollution and Protection Journal, Volume 3, Number 4, December 2018. And that is the link there at the top if you want to go and read the whole thing. In fact, I'll have the link on my website, agentorangeinpanama.com. I blog about all of these things as well, so you can go there and catch up on what I say about them and also pick up that link so you can read the whole document. I just wanted to go over a couple things that he said in here. The abstract says, confusion and misinformation are common when discussing Agent Orange, a tactical herbicide used in the Vietnam War. This is partially the result of inaccurate news coverage or false information that is purposely spread to deceive veterans. That is not true. The one who's been deceiving veterans is Dr. Young himself, first as a first lieutenant and then on as a captain, and I think he retired as a colonel, and he's written over the decades about there's some kind of difference between the tactical version versus the commercial version, when he himself has to know that there is no difference based on historical documentation that I have found and I'll go over with on my blogs. So please follow along. He says science have been ignored while favoring a policy of presumptive compensation promoted by the Agent Orange Act of 1991. Well, that's right. The Agent Orange Act of 1991 is law, and we should be presumptive because in Panama, 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T was shipped there from the very beginning, 1948, all the way until December of 1977, and even after in the 80s called growth regulator instead of 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. So I just want to cruise through here. He says the dioxin contaminant. The analysis of 525 samples of Agent Orange and 557 samples of 2,4-D-5-T collected from companies that produced Agent Orange during the same period provided a mean concentration of 1.88 parts per million TCDD in Agent Orange. Earlier tactical herbicides, which appeared to contain higher amounts than later batches, the estimated amount of TCDD was between 138 and 144 kilograms of TCDD. I'm not sure exactly what kilograms amounts to in parts per million. I don't know why he changes, when he talks about parts per million, then talks about kilograms. But the Agent Purple, according to Wikipedia and Dr. Stellman, says that Agent Purple, which was made before 1965 when Agent Orange came about, Agent Purple had 30 to 50 parts per million versus Agent Orange, which was said to have 0.5 parts per million. He says, with the introduction of the computer and internet websites, anyone with minimal skills may, quote, publish, end quote, anything they want without reference to fact or authoritative review, and then distribute such material for perusal by millions of gullible readers. The real difficulty for historians, scientists, and journalists is in discriminating between truth and misstatement in documents of composite origin or as provided by an author with a cause. This becomes particularly true for the issues related to Agent Orange. He says, I am reminded of the challenge by the Veterans Administration to assess the validity of allegations that Air Force Reserve personnel were exposed to the dioxin in Agent Orange and ranch hand aircraft returned from the Vietnam War that had been cleaned, refitted, and provided to Air Force Reserve bases in the United States. A website was established by a retired Air Force Reserve officer, and from May 2011 through August 2016 posted more than 900 blog comments to include articles, opinions, allegations, and even negative comments about federal and contract employees of the agencies. Using the vehicles of the blog and internet, he sent hundreds of posts to members of the United States Congress, federal agencies, universities, and to dozens of of newspapers throughout the United States. The power of his website comments and the distribution of those comments on the internet successfully forced the Veterans Administration to submit the issue to the Institute of Medicine, who based their decision in favor of the Air Force Reservists on policy and not on science. I hope by using my blog and my website, I can bring out the truth for Panama veterans. I hope that Panama veterans will use this information and share widely. In his acknowledgments, he says the author thanks the U.S. Department of Defense for sponsoring the author to conduct workshops on Agent Orange and the associated dioxin in Hanoi, Vietnam in 2005 and 2007, and in the Republic of Korea in 2011. The author acknowledges the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs for funding an effort for the author to spend 2 years, 2012 to 2014, in the National Archives developing a massive database and preparing reports of documents found on all aspects of the development and testing of the tactical herbicides, their transport, health impacts, and policies in the war in Southeast Asia, 1961 to 1975. Well, if you go to his link that I provided in my prior blog, you'll end up at his collection online of Agent Orange items, and he's missing a few items, like the catalog, the Federal Supply Catalog, that shows that herbicide orange was in the Federal Supply Catalog to be ordered by anyone. In Dr. Young's reports, he said that the tactical herbicide was made of n-butyl ester and 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T, period, 50-50. And here we see in the Federal Supply Service, the General Service Administration, in 1958, they talk about 2,4,5-T, the salts and esters, and how it is made. This was found in the file labeled Correspondence Concerning to the Use of Defoliants in Sea and the Role of Air Force Personnel, 1962 to 1967. And this superseded O-H-210. So in 1958, this was Agent Orange, and it was already being manufactured in 1958. So for them to say that the n-butyl ester was made for Vietnam is absolutely not true. In 1958, it says 2,4,5-T was for use of all federal facilities. And we saw it up in the catalog, the federal stock catalog, up until 1968, before they changed the specification. Up until 1971. And then all of a sudden the catalog just disappears, and it was really difficult to find that catalog at the NARA, but we did find it. It does show that Agent Orange, herbicide orange, was listed in the catalog. Now, they even say the federal standards for these two chemicals, 2,4,5-D and 2,4,5-T, they have a military standard marking and a marking for domestic shipment for civilian agencies. The ones for civilian agencies didn't have this stripe, but the ones for the military for war, to be used tactically in war, had the orange stripe. It says here that the esters in this class shall belong to these types of esters, and as you see, the butyl ester is there in 1958. And down here, let me cruise through here, I'm sorry, but it says chemically pure 2,4,5-T acid and the butyl ester of 2,4,5-T are used as standards. This was a specification in 1958. So to tell me that the butyl ester was only made for Vietnam is simply not true. It shows how to deliver them, how the containers should be marked, how the packaging should be done for the military, in addition to the marking specified in 5.3.1.1, and any special marking required in the contract or order. All containers shall be marked in accordance with military standard MIL-STD 129. So let's take a look at Military Standard 129. Here we go. Military Standard 129. This is the military standard, and what it says, what it is, it's for marking for shipment and storage. So when it said that back here, per military standard, they said that, oh, it was special and it was only made for the military. It's all about the packaging. As we see here, Military Standard 129, marking for shipment and storage. Copies of military standards referenced above required by contractors in connection with specific procurement functions should be obtained from the procuring agency or is directed by the contracting officer. In 71, the Executive Office of the President studied 245T to see what the issue was with it. And in this report, and I'll have this link in my blog on my website as well, but in this report it says the military uses of 245T refers to the employment of 245T in military operations. So I just wanted to go over this document here. This is the EPA position paper of 1979, and the description of the notes is Alvin Young filed this item in his collection under the category Human Exposure to Phenoxy Herbicides and TCDD. So this was the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency position document on 245T in 1979. And this is put out by the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Technical Information Service. This was, the title is 245T, position document number 1, and the performing organization name is Special Pesticide Review Division. And as we saw in the pesticide reviews that I posted a blog on, the FCPC, the Federal Pesticide Review Committee, and wrote those pesticide reviews and kept track of the production and the shipments through the U.S. Commerce Department. It says here under the abstract, preliminary risk assessment, examination of possible unreasonable risk associated with uses of pesticide and a gathering of all available information to determine whether or not this or any other risk does exist. And it initiates literature search and evaluates risk data. Limited information on exposure to forecast extent of risk. So they're telling us in 1979 that there was limited information on exposure to forecast the extent of risk because they had not studied the veterans yet. They were just, working on the Vietnam veterans, and they certainly haven't looked at the Panama veterans to get more data. Says here under manufacturing process and contaminants that 245T is produced commercially. We were told that the stuff that was used in Vietnam was not produced commercially, but it certainly was always produced commercially. It says during the first step in the manufacturing process of 245T, if temperature and pressure are not carefully controlled, highly toxic contaminants, polychlorinated dibenzo P-dioxins may be formed in large quantities. It says since 1950, most of the chemical industry has known that large quantities of TCDD may be formed as a byproduct of the 245 TCP manufacturing process if the procedures are not carefully controlled. At one time, 245T was produced, which contained between 30 to 40 parts per million of TCDD. Between 1968 and 1969, one manufacturer had a 90% decrease in the amount of TCDD present in the 245T it produced. Different manufacturers produced 245T with different TCC contents. So how in the world could they tell the batches that went to Panama that any of them had less or more TCDD in them is beyond me. products. And so by 1968, they realized there was an issue and they needed to tone down the TCDD in the manufacturers. So they sent this procurement specification, a new specification to all the manufacturers, and they asked them to make it closer to 0.5% maximum of TCDD versus the 30 to 40 that had been used prior. So then they say by 1971, industry had reduced the TCD content in commercial samples of 2,4,5-T to less than 1 part per million. But we just saw in the 1968 specification that they asked that orange be the same, because there was no difference between the commercial and the tactical version, the so-called tactical version. So if Alvin Young and Dr. Stellman say the difference between the stuff that I found on the shipping records, 152 pages of U.S. commerce showing 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T shipped to Panama and Vietnam, are not one and the same. Here is a cablegram from the State Department. You see it was paid through the U.S. aid program. You see AIDS-05 up there at the top, some number with the aid number. And this is from the U.S. State Department, and it's to Panama, and it's asking, that 400 metric tons of 2,4,5-T technical butyl ester that's in Panama. We want to make sure that's not sent on to Cuba because we're not trading with Cuba anymore. So this was written to Panama Embassy from Kissinger, the State Department, and it shows that in butyl ester, the technical brand, indeed 400 metric tons was in Panama to be used.